Hey, everybody, this is Barry Mankin here with the Holistic Home Health Podcast. I want to talk to you today about, we're about halfway through the year, but we want to talk and do just like a general overview, talk to you about general conditions in your home, if you've had certain situations, whether you've had remediation or not, HVAC issues or not. We've had so many great interviews. We just finished one taping earlier today with a testimonial. So we're kind of coming off of that, positive note. And just wanted to kind of recap since we've started our podcast. I think we've got maybe 16, 17, 18 podcasts, something like that out there now. And as far as episodes, just trying to help people have a healthier home. If your home is healthy, you're going to be healthy, right? I can't control what you eat or you drink, but obviously, if we can help control what you're breathing, that's more than 40 times your exposure to just about any contaminant in your home. So we're just going to evaluate some of those things. We're going to give some shout outs to people in the past. And again, as we're halfway through this summer season, a lot of things start to come up as it relates to complicated issues with like HVAC, et cetera, coming in and out, how we're buttoned up for the season. And so, we just want to kind of hit some of those bullet points. All right. So we'll start out with your seasonal cleaning, which I think is something that is not addressed in our society. We've talked about this in our top 7, which we'll go over again and just kind of touch on. But our top 7 includes a deep clean twice a year. So whether you've had like remediation or any kind of restoration issues, construction, rehab, anything that you've done to your house, or you haven't had any issues with any of that, and you just need to get a seasonal cleaning. That deep cleaning regimen is very, very important for the particulate matter and what's on that particulate matter as it relates to your exposure. So what we want to do is remove, okay? So there's different ways to do that. And microcleaning can get involved once we are doing, like a remediation effort, especially from a water loss. If we have certain types of molds, it gets a little nerdy. But the idea is, again, we want to remove all those particulates. So when I was growing up and before and beyond, I'm kind of probably in that era where, it started happening less and less and less over the time, like in the 80s. We had both parents usually were getting out into the workforce at that point in our history in America. And we started buttoning things up since the 70s, right? So we've talked about that before. The tighter our energy envelope is, the worse our air quality gets because we're stuck with everything. So whenever the houses were loose, we would still do a seasonal cleaning because usually we're getting an influx of stuff from outside and the houses were drafty. So typically, other than what we bring in, the house is bringing stuff in all the time. And at some point, your biological load, gets to a certain level. It's like, okay, kids, let's get the rugs. Let's take them outside. Let's beat the rugs. So you go out there with a stick, and beat the rugs and the furniture and open the windows and let the air, draft through there to get that load down. Okay. So that's the way it used to look. So what happened since the energy crisis in the 70s? We started to save energy, started working on our carbon footprint a little bit, and we want to button things up. So energy prices are going up. So we need to save money. So what does man do? We chase money, right? And so when we chase the money, we button everything up, then we're stuck with everything in the house. Then we get busy because we're trying to earn more money. So everything is driven by money, which that's just our society and the nature of humans. So not a bad thing, but we need to balance it out with prevention. As it relates to health, that prevention is in the form of particulate matter, dust and debris, and everything that's on that dust and debris that has to get removed. So the short is seasonal cleaning at minimum has to happen. If you've had a water event and you've had remediation and you haven't done a deep micro clean on your house, especially if you're sensitized, especially if you've had allergies or ongoing issues, manage the pets. So that's a wild card in there. Manage your HVAC, the other big wild card in the house as it relates to cleaning. All that has to be cleaned at the same time, okay? So I'm talking horizontal surfaces. I'm talking move the furniture. I'm talking clean the furniture, clean the bedding. That seasonal cleaning, especially if you're sensitized, you're getting a HEPA vac, some sort of a HEPA. Look at the ratings on the performance of that. And I'm talking the trim, tops of doors, tops of cabinets, curtains, blinds, window ledges, all of that biological load that builds up into the house that never gets touched because we're all too busy. It's imperative that we remove that stuff. And if you're the sensitized individual, you're not the one doing it. Okay? So take note of that. Too many times do I go through all this stuff for clients, sensitized people, and they are the ones cleaning it. Or they're checking it out, and they're like, oh, that's awful. Isn't here? You smell that. It's terrible. Yes. That's not what you want to do. Quit exposing yourself to, such a source of problems that's going to aggravate you worse. Other people need to clean that are not sensitized like you are, if you're that person. Okay? So get away from it. Get out of the house when it's happening. Trust people with a process and get that seasonal cleaning done. If you're not sensitive to those things, just wear some personal protection, a mask or whatever, and then make sure it's sealed up decently, and then remove all of that debris. Get HEPA-Vac on your furniture. Get HEPA-Vac on your beds, dust mites, bed bugs, etc. Whether you think you have them or not, dust mites are on the rise, right? And they love dead skin cells. Guess where all the dead skin cells are? Where you sleep. Okay. You got to get that stuff out of, and the only thing that removes that to a degree is going to be a HEPA-Vac. So you have to be able to remove that off the mattress. We just talked about different laundering processes. You can look that up on our other podcasts because I don't want to advertise any specific products here. That's not what I do. Nor do I want to get in trouble with any of that in case somebody, sees something and says, well, you didn't promote our products or you said ours was bad. But other people on our previous podcasts have said what works. So at least better than other things. So with that said, look that up, get some good laundering techniques. And then if you need any testing, obviously Four Corners is happy to help because you got to verify. So if you're not getting better and you think it's your environment, make sure you get somebody like us in there. And so getting that seasonal clean done at the end of the spring, which is at least now, if not earlier, a month and a half earlier than this, and at the end of the fall before you button up for the winter, very, very important, okay? So that seasonal cleaning is a huge, huge deal. Microfiber cloths, that sort of thing, can get even finer debris. If obviously the offense and defense, which we've talked about in the past as it relates to products, we have some products too. If you want to look on our website, fourcornersenvironmental.com, just to be, again, it's like icing. It's not supposed to be a fix for the cleaning. It's not supposed to be a fix for a source or a problem. It's just, again, icing. Now, and that's just for maintenance. But that helps bring your load down. Then when you have these things, those filters, even if you have a cheap one, whatever, take that HEPA-Vac, get the outside of that filter and remove the overall load. It's going to help save on your replacement of those filter costs a little bit and help keep it working efficiently because at some point, we never clean them the way we should, number one. Number two, those filters are really expensive. And depending on which ones you get. But the idea is just a way to make that longevity happen and give yourself a regimen for cleaning. If you have animals, I tell you to do that once a week. Just open the little case and just suck the stuff out just like you'd vacuum your carpets, all right? Other than that, don't trust the light, okay? Just don't trust the light. Do it on your own regimen and make sure it's more than that, all right? So at least once a month. And then we're talking about HVAC because we're in the middle of summer and energy bills are going up and, all the things come in to play with that as well. I was just at a house yesterday where we were using our Instascope to do a diagnostic on a couple of rooms. And we were talking about things, just general concepts. And we always want to look at the filter of the HVAC. So these people were from out of town, and they've been in this house for a few years. And once we started talking about these concepts, I said, well, let's just look at the filter. And I said, sometimes these things happen, and about 5 or 6 times a year, I see somebody that has Elvis's jungle room in their house for mold. And it's because of how they're operating their HVAC, which we touched on this, again, on previous episodes. But this person had their HVAC in the on position. And that's not ideal in a moist climate, especially. So they're from a different climate where the air is drier and the weather is fair, and you just are moving the air with the fan in the on position, whether it's conditioning or not. And those systems are usually, they have different stages of fans for different applications, whether you're actually conditioning or not conditioning or filtering or what have you. In this particular case, that system isn't designed in that way. It is a simple system to deliver air conditioning and cooler air in the summer and warmer air in the winter. And the system was left in the on position. So what happens with that, other than the restrictive filter that they had going on, which we've talked about? So we said, get your MERV rating down lower. Get your HVAC in the auto position to go by temperature. It should be designed or engineered, if it was laid out correctly, to get to a certain desired temperature within a certain range of humidity. So if we restrict that airflow, we're restricting the amount of moisture that is coming out of the air efficiently in a moist climate like Tennessee, and it becomes problematic. If they're restricting it, number one. Number two, it was dirty. You're losing about 30% of your efficiency just from debris. So it needed to be cleaned and sanitized. That's a promotion and a shout out for 3-in-1 duct cleaning if you're in Nashville. Then if you also have it in the on position, now what happens, even if those things are all great, what happens is that coil doesn't get to recover at all. It's supposed to be condensating. So if that fan is constantly blowing against that coil, and it cannot, at some point the condensation stops, right? And now you just have moist air swimming around. Because what happens, you get to that point, then the lines that you have that come through here with that temperature differential on your supply lines there, what happens is the line set itself is designed for one line to be hot and one line to be at a cooler temperature. And so that creates, along with the available humidity that's coming in from the house, that condensation. You get to your dew point, which removes it from the air, and then you blow against that coil. It just mimics our skin, right? Just like you're outside and you sweat, you get a cool breeze, you feel cooler. That temperature differential is somewhere around 15 to 20 degrees, depending on the performance of the unit, etc. And so we get a cooler temperature. That's how it's supposed to work. So if you, again, have in the on position, it dries all that out eventually. And then now you're just moving air that's not getting the humidity pulled from it, because that coil never gets to recover and get that temperature differential again to where you can create condensation. So that stops that process after a while. And then once that coil is dried out, it's no longer condensating. Now you're just moving moist air, and that humidity can raise into the 60s and sometimes the 70s. And you're going to, at different times of the day, you're going to have moisture or dew basically on all your stuff. So don't put it in the, unless your system is designed for airflow outside of its conditioning at a lower level with certain filtration, with certain sizing, etc. This is where it comes to Nathan Copeland, who we had out here not that long ago. We also had John Ellis out here, which we'll talk about. So shout out to those guys again. We had wonderful podcasts with them. Look them up, and they'll talk to you about these things. They'll talk to you about performance issues. as long as you're dealing with a clean system that is efficiently performing, and it doesn't have the restriction, and it is designed for the sizing of the ductwork, which the sizing of the ductwork is a big part of that. You should have an efficient system and be comfortable with the right relative humidity, which doesn't feed debris, which again, we talked about the particulates on the front end. Now the moisture on the back end, food and water, right? Which we've talked about many, many times. That food and water is what grows things. Everything's biological. I need food and water to live. The mold needs food and water to live. All right? So keep that in mind. I know we're moving fast here. But again, we're just doing a review because we're halfway through the year of all the things that we've talked about. Outside influences. Right now we're doing irrigation because we're trying to manage, we want everything to grow outside, which is fine. But usually right around that foundation especially, everybody waters too much. Unless you're restricted in certain parts of the country or certain jurisdictions, you're trying to just get your plants to grow. Most of the time people water too much. So, and we just figure that's just part of it. So if you have an irrigation system, you have enough money to pay the bill, you just figure whatever. You can manage that better. And most people are doing twice as much water, if not more, than what they really need, especially for plants. You're going to have your mulch, everything that holds that moisture down, better soil around that foundation to grow things. And so other than the soil being permeable, that allows that to filter through and get to a basement or a crawl space or a slab and be drawn up into the house, and that moisture being such at a high concentration level that the permeability of whatever those surfaces are, whatever that substrate is, whatever that the concrete is, whatever the permeability of it is, it's going to draw. And that house is under negative pressure. You got thermodynamics that come into play with that, where it's trying to draw in just the relative humidity right around the house on the outside. Again, other than rain, it's irrigation. So we got to get that volume down just enough to where A, we don't have leaks, B, we're not doing so much volume per head, and C, the overall watering times are just enough to keep everything living. Usually a couple times a week is, unless you're just giving a little spurt for the heat whenever you're in the really bad times for heat, just enough for the plants to live is all you really need. Check out your permeable soil that's right along the foundation, which is usually after your plantings are already there. You've got a gap about this much between a lot of plants, and then you want to make sure that that is nothing but clay and junk. So you rake back your aesthetic as it relates to your gravel or your mulch, and then replacing that permeable soil, if it is good topsoil, because you're not growing anything against the house. You just want it for the plant. You're going to replace that with non-permeable soil so that whatever water comes down flashes away from the house so that it can drain away, all right? So you want positive drainage away from the home all the time. Then we get into the drainage around the home. So then we talk about what's going on your downspouts. What's up above? Are we managing your gutters? The gutters should not be blocked, right? So make sure, double check that they're clean for this, usually the spring season because we get more rain. But if that wasn't done, check it for the summer. Clean, 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 all right? Then gutter guards. If you need gutter guards and you have trees anywhere that are going to influence those gutters in the fall, get them on now before the fall hits, because you're going to end up cleaning them again, especially if you got 2 stories. You just might as well do it. Then you can control what goes in there. Then it's just a matter of, okay, what's underground? If you've got underground drainage systems associated with your downspouts or your perimeter foundation drain, you need to daylight all those. You need to know where they dissipate, and you need to validate the integrity of them so that they're not backing up water or injecting water around your foundation, which again will get drawn up into your home or your crawl space or basement. So I know we're moving fast. So the top 7 things that we talked about on the interior, so those are like outside influences. Now inside influence, we talked about, again, the deep clean. We talked about the ductwork cleaning and going through all that, making sure that's all checked with cameras. The performance of the HVAC we talked about. Those are huge. monitoring your indoor relative humidity, monitoring your humidity in the crawl space with hygrometers and sensors that can Bluetooth or hardwired if you're an EMF person with all that. And then knowing what that is, that goes to performance and that goes to outside influences. Your goal is around 45 to 50% all year long. So in the winter, you're going to add, believe it or not, and then in the rest of the year, your HVAC should be taking care of it. It gets a little more complicated in the spring and the fall where you may have to do a little bit of heat and cool blend, between the evenings and the days to help with the humidity. And depending on how new the house is, if you've got a slab that's curing still, a lot of different factors come into play with that. But it's always outside influences that can be associated with the house. So we talk about that monitoring. We talk about fresh air makeup. This is where we get into John Ellis again. If you're going to go mechanical, look that episode up. John Ellis is the master of helping to understand that. As far as the implementation of that, as it relates to Nashville, it's going to be Copeland. All right. So check those guys out. And as far as fresh air, another simple thing you can do, especially if like you're cooking or you got the dryer on, for favorable conditions, outside, you can always just open a window, have a screen, and if you want to throw like a filter in there, just in case what's going on outside, it's not going to stop the humidity necessarily, but you can get some fresh air makeup whenever you're trying to exhaust. It's 1-to-1. So when you're taking air out of the house that's already under negative pressure, it's got to make it up from someplace. At least you can control where it comes in from. Just know that you got to manage that humidity during this time of season, or you at least try to do that stuff in the morning. Otherwise, you're going mechanical. All right. So a good way to measure or monitor this is just with, again, an air quality monitor. So not just the relative humidity, but you can get an air quality monitor that gives you several parameters. Don't depend on the one on your HVAC unit. I don't care what they say. They're not accurate. Okay. So they can be mad. Just saying there's variances. But if you have a separate air quality monitor, depending on your price point and the reviews, blah, 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 you want to know what your carbon dioxide level is. You want to know what your PM 2.5 is at least. You want to know what your relative humidity is, right? So like all the TVOC levels, all these parameters, okay? So when we talk about fresh air makeup, that also goes to TVOCs. TVOCs, total volatile organic compounds. When we're talking about that, if you got a newer home, if you've got newer furniture, if you've got new carpet, anything new, okay? Other than that, if there's mold influences going on, you can get volatile organic compounds being released from that byproduct of the breakdown of the materials. That can be happening as well, MVOCs. So look at different ways to do that other than, again, dilution, which goes to fresh air makeup. It's just like drinking water for your body and flushing things out. You're just doing it with air, okay? But if you're doing a baking process, that's a possibility. You can heat the home up. Just make sure how you heat the home up is important. You don't want to just go from cool to heat. You want to just go right into heat and gradually. So if you're coming from the summer and you want to do that, find a favorable day where you're not calling on the HVAC for cooling and try to just ramp that up. You get it, mid 80s to 90s and bake that house for a good 4 or 5 hours, right? And then come back home because you're not going to hang out unless you just want to sweat everywhere and dilute all of that. Open the windows up, dilute it, and then you're going to push VOCs out of some of those building materials, some of your furnishings, et cetera. And then it's kind of like a stress test. You're kind of getting the load of what's available chemicals to come out of those products. And that'll help off-gas some of that. So heat is a good way to do that. It's not a guarantee, but it will do some improvement. And that's flooring glues, that's finishes, paint, etc. The other way to do that is like if you have something that is just smelling all the time. I had a plant one time. There's some plants in here. And I had a customer say they had this weird smell, but it would waft into different rooms at different times of the day. Well, it turns out what we found was it was a plant, a fake plant at a window, the heat from the sun, radiant heat from the window, was hitting the plant, which was not real. It's a fake plant, and it was off-gassing VOCs at different times of the day, and then those VOCs would hover with the air currents in the house into different parts. So they would think that they had a source somewhere, where they did have a source, but it wasn't like behind the wall or something. It was a plant. So it's that simple. That's, again, how heat can react with different synthetic products, okay? So that's another thing that you can do. Other than you remove that source, and in that case, get rid of the plant. If you can't, satisfy this, then you're actually removing the source. Other than that, you're looking at dilution again, which goes to mechanical or window, but it comes with other baggage, unless you're doing mechanical really well. Okay, so this goes to combustion. So if you have a combustion appliances, if you have a home that has a combustion air or fresh air makeup system, I'm going to tell you in our area, either an ERV, but preferably, in my opinion, a fresh air makeup that has a dehumidifier and a filter in place is really the way to do that. That mixes the air with a ventilator mixer with the indoor air, so you stay away from dew point, and then deliver it into your HVAC. That's clean. So John Ellis talked about that last time. And so not just VOCs, not just fresh air makeup for just having better carbon dioxide levels, but also for carbon. Because again, it's 1-to-1. If the system is already in place, you're bringing the baggage in from outside, you're bringing in the moisture from outside into a system that should be clean. And then adding more contaminants from outside. Ozone comes into play with that if you're one of those guys. So there's levels of this stuff that we can measure. We don't know your area specifically all the time, but those potentials are definitely out there. But we know allergens, we know molds, we know different influences that come into play other than pollution outside, depending on if you're close to a carbon monoxide levels, right? If you're close to a highway, if you're close to an airport, what have you, you could be drawing that in just so that you can cook. When you turn your vent on, that flap opens up, that allows that air to come into your HVAC, and you're contaminating, right? So you get oxygen, which is what codes require, but you get all the other baggage. So the only way to do that is to control it. And the only way you control it is you use John's methods, and you get somebody good that knows how to implement that in your area. If you have a remediation problem, we've talked about that through Mickey Schrader with EPS. We talked about the restoration side of it, which kind of goes sometimes hand in hand with Don Canar with Blue Chip Restoration. Shout out to those guys that we've had on the podcast. Really, like the top two guys in town, right? So as it relates to if you have a problem and you need those guys, you get somebody like us. We come in and do an evaluation on the front end of a problem. If you think you have water, unless it's an immediate water event and you get it within a few days and you want to call down to dry it up, great. But if that water's been there for a long time or any length of time, or it's undisclosed and you don't know, or if there's history of that, we define that. Then you call somebody, or somebody like us will define that. We do measurements, we do testing, we do a good investigation. We do all those things on the front end to give a good diagnosis for that situation. And then if you need remediation, then we point to somebody that is qualified to do that. And that's where, again, typically we recommend EPS or Blue Chip Restoration in those instances. And you get into crawl space issues with that sometimes, where you're dealing with prevention as it relates to removal of mold off the wood. In our area, we have a lot of crawl spaces. And then you get into prevention like vapor barriers, encapsulation, different methods of encapsulation. And you get into those sorts of things where it can help isolate that and prevent it from happening. Again, dehumidifiers come into play, but that also is in conjunction with those outside influences. So again, this all goes into the overall building science and the envelope and how the envelope reacts what type of wood it is, what are the mechanical systems, what's the interstitial wall cavity doing, ventilation. We haven't even talked about that, as it relates to natural ventilation for the attic, if you're spray foam, blah, blah, blah. So all of these things, radon, comes into play. All this stuff's going to eventually kill you anyway, so really, why do we worry about it? Because we want a longer, healthier life. Okay. So we're all going to die from something. But hopefully, if it's something that's preventable and something we can be intentional with, it's not going to be on us. All right. So these houses are not designed for us to be healthy, guys. They're just not. And they're designed to fit a minimum standard for energy efficiency, which in different areas complicates things in different ways for you not to be healthy. I believe that this epidemic that we have with chronic inflammatory response syndrome is directly related to not only our food and our water, but in our homes as it relates to all of these influences. And we have sick building syndrome. So we treat the house like a person. We get the house as healthy as possible so the inhabitants can be as healthy as possible. So that's a lot. It's a mouthful. So that's an overall view of what we've done so far. We're going to dig into different ways for this to be specific. We've got other interviews coming up soon. But since this was like halfway through the year, I wanted to just give you an overall breakdown for these things. The last thing that I'll talk about is I was just at my mom's place in Missouri, and she's had some health issues as of recent, and we wanted to say, okay, we got to get things as healthy as possible. So my siblings and we go through it, and I bring all my stuff, and then I'm kicking myself for why I haven't done this sooner. So other than the dogs and the carpet and the history, the carpet's 21 years old, everything's 21 years old. So you can imagine HVAC, outside influences have been really taken care of because of the families in the landscape business, so we've learned how to deal with water management from the outside in. However, everything that they're trapped with, that energy efficiency of the home is fantastic. So she's been stuck with everything. And then you bring some dogs in the house, right? So we're looking at numbers, and we're looking at the carpet and the numbers in that. We're measuring everything, and I'm telling you, the carbon dioxide levels, everything. I was beside myself. So it's the carpenter that doesn't have his house finished, or the shoemaker that doesn't have any shoes, or whatever analogy you want to use. It's in my own family, So I've got all kinds of stories like that. I've got a brother that's been sick from mold in the past and got sensitized from direct influence, and that was before I was even in this industry. So here, just lo and behold, recently, and then we're testing the well water out there as well. So it happens to the best of us, So we just have to be intentional. We have to take care of our people, our families, our friends, and live intentionally, measure, know what you're dealing with, get good people around you to kind of help define things, because there's always a reason, there's always a root, and we can make our homes healthier than they've ever been and get a balance between the energy efficiency and the air quality if we just have some intention and some care and competency. All right? So hopefully all that helps. I know that was a whole lot packed into a little tiny space here, but dissect it, chew on it a little bit, and hopefully that helps you. Stay healthy out there, okay? Thanks.